Dawn in the Serengeti does not arrive with a gentle whisper or the soft stretch of light across a quiet land. It erupts. The horizon, once cloaked in the ink of night, ignites in streaks of fire as the sun lifts itself above the edge of the earth like a curtain rising on nature's grandest stage. Before the sky has even fully shed its darkness, the plains tremble with life. The Serengeti doesn't wake up. It charges out of sleep like a predator uncaged. Stretching over 30,000 square kilometers, this colossal canvas of earth and sky is no ordinary landscape. It is a living, breathing battlefield, carved by millennia of struggle, ruled by no one, yet governed by laws older than time. In the Serengeti, every creature has a role, but no one is guaranteed safety. Here, life is written not in days and seasons, but in battles fought tooth, claw, hoof, and horn. It is a place where the air itself carries the scent of conflict, and the ground is scarred with the tracks of those who chased, fled, survived, or died. As the first rays of sun spill across the savanna, the grasslands erupt into a golden sea, shimmering like polished brass beneath a sky still streaked with the last brushstrokes of dawn. The grass seems almost too beautiful, too serene, until you remember that every blade hides the drama of survival. These endless plains are not a peaceful pasture. They are an open arena where the gladiators of the wild face off every day, driven not by choice, but by necessity. Beneath the calm swaying of the grasses, the gears of conflict are already grinding to life. In the distance, herds of wildebeest begin their ancient shuffle, snorting clouds of breath into the cool morning air, their hooves drumming a steady rhythm of migration. They do not know exactly why they move, only that they must. Following the pulse of rains and the promise of fresh grazing, they are part of an unstoppable tide, numbering in the millions. Zebras join them in contrasting black and white flashes, peppering the brown herds like living punctuation marks in this great moving sentence of survival. Grant's gazelles, Thompson's gazelles, and elands flank the herds, skittish and graceful, always on high alert, as if they can feel the eyes watching from the shadows. And there are always eyes. From beneath the umbrella-like shade of acacia trees, lions stir awake, not lazily, but with the slow, practiced calculation of creatures who know that timing is everything. Their golden coats blend perfectly with the sun-drenched grasses, and as they stretch and yawn, jaws opening wide to reveal teeth honed by generations of conquest, they survey their kingdom. A kingdom built not of stone, but of opportunity and blood. The Serengeti is their battlefield, their banquet hall and their burial ground all at once. They are rulers, yes, but even kings must hunt. Not far from the pride's resting place, a clan of hyenas begins its raucous patrol. Their laughter is not humor, but code, a language rich with intent, strategy, and social politics. To the untrained ear, it is chaos. To the hyena, it is coordination. They are the tacticians of the Serengeti, scavengers by reputation but killers by design. In these wide-open fields, hyenas are more than opportunists. They are organized militias, patrolling their territories with disciplined precision, harassing lions, stealing kills, and sometimes making their own with brutal efficiency. Where lions command with brute force, hyenas dominate with sheer numbers and nerve. Above it all, vultures spiral like living storm clouds, their wide wings catching the thermals rising from the warming earth. They do not miss a thing. Their eyes can spot a carcass from miles away, and their presence is both a prediction and a promise. Death has come, or it soon will. They drift on invisible highways in the sky, waiting patiently for the Serengeti's daily theater of violence to offer them a seat at the feast. And lurking even closer, under the concealment of golden grasses, cheetahs stretch their slender bodies, built not for endurance but for speed. Unlike the power-laden lion or the brute resilience of the hyena, the cheetah is crafted for that single electrifying moment when tension explodes into motion. They watch the herds with laser focus, calculating wind, distance, and the angle of the sun. One mistake could cost them the hunt, and there are no second chances for creatures who burn their energy like a wildfire. As the sun climbs higher, the tension in the Serengeti tightens like a coiled spring. Every creature, predator and prey alike, moves with a sense of urgency that borders on desperation. The heat begins to press down, flattening the grasses and quickening the heartbeat of the land. Waterholes become crowded junctions of fragile truces, where lions lurk in the reeds and crocodiles patrol the muddy fringes with sinister patience. Here in these shrinking pools, survival is a game of inches, and every sip could be the last. But it is not only the living beasts that shape the Serengeti's war-torn beauty. The very landscape itself is a battlefield sculptor. Droughts crack the earth into puzzles of dust, while rains transform the plains into emerald seas, inviting the great herds to return and the cycle to spin anew. The volcanic hills in the distance, long cooled but forever smoldering in spirit, loom over the savanna like ancient spectators, their slopes marked by the footprints of elephants and rhinos who pass in silent dignity through the chaos below. Even the winds play their part, carrying the scent of blood, fear, and victory across vast distances. Predators taste these winds, reading them like scrolls, interpreting the movements of herds and the vulnerabilities of the moment. Prey animals lift their muzzles, nostrils flaring, eyes wide, ears twitching. In the Serengeti, the wind does not just whisper, it warns. This is a battlefield without ceasefire. Battles unfold in layers. Lion versus wildebeest, hyena versus lion, cheetah versus time, vultures versus decay. It is an endless rotation of power, a ruthless but exquisitely balanced dance, where every death feeds life, and every life is merely a temporary victory over the inevitable. There are no villains here, only participants in a system too vast and too ancient to judge. As evening falls, shadows stretch long across the plain, and the Serengeti's pulse begins to slow, but never stops. The daytime predators grow weary, seeking shade to digest their victories, while the nocturnal hunters awaken, eyes gleaming in the twilight. Jackals skulk between lion leftovers, servals stalk the underbrush for rodents, and the haunting calls of hyenas echo under the rising moon. Even in darkness, the battlefield persists, cloaked not in silence, but in anticipation. The Serengeti awakens not just each morning, but every moment. It is a perpetual dawn of life and death, a colossal, breathing arena where the game never ends, and every creature from the tiniest insect to the largest elephant plays its part. Here in this endless battlefield, survival is not a destination, it is a way of life, a pulse that beats in time with the sun and the storms, the hunger and the hope. And this is just the beginning of the war. Beneath the burning Serengeti sky, where the golden grass stretches like a sea of sunlit blades, empires rise and fall, not with the stroke of a pen or the clang of swords, but with the deep, thunderous echoes of a lion's roar. This is a land of bloodlines carved by claw and fang, where thrones are not inherited but seized, and dynasties are written into the dust beneath royal paws. To rule in the Serengeti is to fight for every breath, every inch of territory, every passing season. And no family knows this better than the lions, Africa's undisputed monarchs of muscle and mane, whose dynasties burn bright but seldom burn long. At first glance, a pride of lions basking in the morning glow might appear like a lazy parliament of sunbathers, sprawled in golden heaps, tails flicking lazily, eyes half shut against the glare. But beneath this facade of feline leisure lies a kingdom held together by tension thicker than the summer heat. These are no sleepy house cats. They are warriors recovering from their latest campaign, soldiers enjoying a brief armistice before the inevitable war drums beat once again. They are a family, yes, but one built on ruthless ambition and relentless strategy. At the heart of every lion pride lies its bloodline, a matrilineal thread that weaves through generations of lionesses. These females are the true backbone of the dynasty, sisters, mothers, aunts, and cousins, united by kinship and survival instinct. They do not wander as the males do. They are the keepers of territory, the teachers of cubs, and the huntresses who bring down wildebeest and zebra with lethal coordination. Unlike the restless males, lionesses hold the land year after year, outliving one coalition of males after another. Their loyalty is not to the kings, but to the pride itself, a lineage older than any passing reign. The males, on the other hand, are born into exile. From the moment their manes begin to grow thick and their muscles swell with youth, they become threats to the ruling coalition. Forced out by their own fathers or uncles, young males are cast adrift into the unforgiving wilderness, banished from their birthright and sentenced to a nomadic existence. But exile is not death, it is preparation. These exiled princes form coalitions with their brothers or fellow outcasts, forging bonds of survival and future conquest. They roam the plains like wandering warlords, biding their time, learning the lay of rival territories, sharpening their skills in the shadows of stronger lions. When they come of age, hardened by hunger and experience, these coalitions transform from ragtag bands of exiles into invading armies. They move with quiet determination, shadows at first, then thunder when the time is right. Approaching a pride, they challenge the reigning males with brutal clarity. There is no diplomacy, no hesitation. The battle for dominance is violent and absolute. Clashes of muscle and fury erupt under the baking sun as rival males explode into combat, fangs slashing, claws raking, dust rising in choking clouds around them. For the deposed kings, there is no mercy. If they survive the onslaught, they are left to flee, wounded, humiliated, and exiled to a solitary life on the outskirts of the Serengeti, where starvation and hyena mobs await. And as the new rulers claim their throne, the bloodline wars begin in earnest. The lionesses, pragmatic and fiercely protective of their lineage, brace for the inevitable. The cubs, sired by the previous rulers, are now enemies of the new regime, reminders of another male's legacy, and therefore must be erased. Infanticide, as brutal as it may seem, is the cruel logic of lion dynasties. By eliminating the previous generation's cubs, the new kings force the lionesses back into estrus, ensuring that their own bloodline will dominate the future of the pride. It is nature's cold arithmetic, a savage reset that ensures the survival of the strongest genes. The lionesses resist when they can, whisking cubs into hidden creches, fighting tooth and claw to defend them. But often the sheer force of the invading coalition is too great, and the legacy of the fallen kings is wiped clean. Once the violence subsides, a fragile peace settles over the pride. The new rulers patrol their hard-won territory with vigilance, scent-marking every bush, roaring into the twilight to announce their supremacy. Their voices roll across the savannah like thunder, carrying a message not only to their pride, but to every rival male within earshot. The land is taken, the throne occupied, the dynasty reborn. But they know, as all lions know, that their reign is borrowed time. For in the Serengeti, no kingdom lasts forever. The balance of power here is a living thing, shifting like the shadows cast by the passing sun. Prides fragment and reform, coalitions rise and fall, and the bloodline wars continue with unrelenting momentum. A coalition that once ruled with iron claws may, within a few short years, find itself outnumbered by a younger, stronger alliance. The victors today are the victims tomorrow, and the Serengeti watches these dynastic cycles unfold with ancient, impartial eyes. Yet, amid this brutal saga, there is a strange and undeniable beauty. The lion's story is not merely one of conquest and death, it is also one of resilience, kinship, and the indomitable will to survive. Cubs born under the new regime grow swiftly, learning to stalk and pounce under the watchful eyes of their mothers. Adolescent males wrestle in mock combat, rehearsing for the real battles that await them beyond the safety of the pride. Lionesses move with lethal grace across the savannah, orchestrating hunts with silent signals and unspoken coordination, feeding not just their cubs, but the future of their dynasty. And in the quiet moments, when the heat of the day fades into the cool hush of dusk, the pride gathers beneath the fading amber light. They groom one another, heads nuzzled, tails flicking, a scene of familial tenderness that belies the ferocity of their existence. It is a reminder that even in a world shaped by violence, moments of connection endure. They are warriors, yes, but also companions, mothers, brothers, and sons. As night falls over the Serengeti, the lion's roars continue to echo across the plains, a living testament to the ceaseless cycle of rise and fall, of conquest and collapse. The stars wheel overhead, indifferent to the dramas below, but for the lions, every roar is both a triumph and a warning. The battle for legacy never ends, and every generation must fight anew for its place in the sun. In this endless arena of dust and destiny, lion dynasties are not preserved through peace, but through power, courage, and the relentless drive to leave behind a mark that will outlast their own fleeting reign. The Serengeti is their kingdom, but it is the bloodline wars that write their history, one claw mark at a time. When the Serengeti sun begins its relentless climb, burning the dew off the savannah and turning the grasses into waves of shimmering gold, most creatures take this as their cue to slow down. Lions slip back into shaded thickets, panting from their nocturnal escapades. Hyenas retreat to their dens, bellies swollen from the night's feast. Even the prey animals huddle under the sparse shadows of thorn trees, conserving energy beneath the sun's unforgiving glare. But not the cheetah. No, this slender phantom of the plains chooses the very heat of the day, when the great predators doze and the shadows shrink, to enter its battlefield. Because for the cheetah, survival isn't just a game of speed, it's a gamble of timing, a daring sprint between danger and opportunity. The Serengeti, vast and open, is not a forgiving arena for a hunter of subtlety. Unlike the leopards who vanish into the cloak of leaves or the lions who ambush from cover, the cheetah must play its cards in full view of the world. There is nowhere to hide in these open plains, no thick forest to shield the twitch of a tail or the flicker of sharp amber eyes. But this is exactly where the cheetah thrives. In the open combat of the sun-baked battlefield, where speed is the sharpest blade, and surprise lies not in concealment, but in the explosion of movement itself. The cheetah is a creature engineered by evolution's most daring architect. Every line of its body is drawn with purpose. Its slender frame, light as air yet coiled with muscle, seems to float above the ground, its spine a spring of pure potential energy. Its oversized nostrils flare wide, gulping down oxygen to fuel the inferno that ignites in its lungs during the hunt. The tail, long and muscular, acts like a rudder on a racing yacht, steering with exquisite precision through every twist and turn of the chase. Even its black tear marks that streak down from the eyes serve a role, reducing glare from the harsh sun and focusing its gaze on the prize ahead. But speed alone is not enough in this unforgiving arena. Speed burns fast and hot, like a flame doused by its own fury. A cheetah's sprint lasts mere heartbeats, 20 to 30 seconds at most. Any longer, and its finely tuned engine begins to overheat, threatening to cook the predator from the inside out. In this narrow window of opportunity, everything must go perfectly. There is no margin for error. A wrong turn, a stumble, or a moment's hesitation means failure. And in the Serengeti, failure means hunger, weakness, and the slow erasure of a bloodline. The hunt begins with the quiet patience of a master strategist. The cheetah moves low to the ground, blending as much as possible with the swaying grasses, inching closer to the unsuspecting herd. Its gaze locks onto a target, a young gazelle perhaps, or a distracted impala. The cheetah reads the landscape like a seasoned general studies a battlefield, the direction of the wind, the lay of the terrain, the spacing of the herd. Every factor weighs into the decision to strike. And then, in a moment as sudden as a lightning flash, the cheetah releases the coil of its body, and the chase is on. What follows is not a mere pursuit. It is an elemental display of physics and predation colliding at breathtaking speed. The cheetah accelerates from 0 to 90 kilometers per hour in under 3 seconds, faster than most sports cars, faster than reason itself. Its legs blur into a seamless motion, its spine flexing and extending like a living whip, propelling the predator forward in long, bounding strides that eat up the ground. The gazelle darts in panic, zigzagging to throw off its pursuer, but the cheetah anticipates every feint, adjusting mid-stride with the precision of a heat-seeking missile. Yet even in the midst of this furious burst, the cheetah's mind remains cool, calculating, utterly focused. It must close the gap within seconds, before its muscles flood with lactic acid and its lungs scream for mercy. When it reaches striking distance, it lashes out with a paw, hooking the hind legs of its quarry and bringing it tumbling to the ground. A quick, suffocating bite to the throat ends the contest, and the cheetah, victorious but spent, collapses beside its hard-won meal, sides heaving, tongue lolling. But the Serengeti is not a place that allows its victors to bask for long. Even as the cheetah gulps down precious breaths, eyes scan the horizon for the next wave of danger. The big cats may sleep during the day, but scavengers do not. Hyenas, with their extraordinary sense of smell and unshakable tenacity, can detect a kill from kilometers away and arrive with the enthusiasm of uninvited dinner guests. Jackals slink in from the edges, hoping to snatch a scrap while the cheetah is still catching its breath. Vultures begin their spirals above, a silent signal to every scavenger within sight that an opportunity has arisen. For the cheetah, this is the bitter aftertaste of victory. It does not have the raw power to defend its kill. Unlike the lion, which can fend off challengers with brute strength, or the hyena, which relies on clan warfare, the cheetah is a solitary hunter whose strength lies in the pursuit, not the aftermath. And so, with a resigned flick of its tail, It abandons the remains of its meal as the scavengers descend, taking with them the spoils of its energy-draining chase. This fragile existence is especially perilous for cheetah mothers raising cubs on the Serengeti plains. She must balance the hunt with constant vigilance, for her young are irresistible targets for predators. Lionesses will kill cheetah cubs to eliminate future competition, and hyenas see them as easy meals. The mother cheetah moves her cubs frequently, carrying them gently by the scruff from one hiding place to another, hoping to stay one step ahead of death itself. Her hunts are often brief, desperate affairs, snatching what food she can before danger forces her to flee. Yet, despite the odds, the cheetah endures. Perhaps it is because of the very fragility of its existence that it clings so fiercely to life. It survives not by overpowering its enemies, but by outpacing them, by seizing fleeting moments of opportunity with breathtaking precision. It lives on the edge of exhaustion and extinction, yet it lives. It raises its cubs in the face of constant peril. It runs again and again, knowing that every chase could be its last. As the sun begins its slow descent, casting the Serengeti in long shadows and molten hues, the cheetah retreats into the growing cool of evening. Its silhouette, lean and graceful, fades into the golden backdrop of grass and dusk. Another day's battles fought, some won, some lost. But the war continues. Tomorrow, as the sun rises over this unforgiving arena, the cheetah will play its part once more in the endless saga of speed and survival. Because in the Serengeti, open combat is not a choice, it is a way of life. And for the cheetah, life is a race that never truly ends. As the Serengeti breathes beneath the weight of another rising sun, the plains come alive with their familiar rhythm. The lumbering elephants make their steady progress through the thorny scrub. Zebra herds shift restlessly like a restless tide, and lions stretch lazily beneath the shade of acacia trees, blinking at the heat of the day with royal disinterest. But somewhere, away from the regal pace of kings and the solitary dance of the cheetahs, there is a different kind of predator awakening. A force less showy but no less formidable. Lean, long-limbed, and moving with the cohesion of a well-oiled machine, the African wild dogs slip through the landscape like shadows on four legs. They are not loners, not blundering mobs. They are precision-made flesh. And in the wide-open arenas of the Serengeti, they play a game few can rival: the ruthless art of coordinated chaos. African wild dogs, or painted wolves as some romantically call them, are not what you expect from Africa's predatory roster. They do not roar. They do not stalk from the shadows like cats. They do not lumber with prehistoric weight like crocodiles. They are slim creatures, built for distance over burst, dressed in a patchwork of earthy yellows, blacks, and whites that looks more like an artist's carefree brushstrokes than an evolutionary camouflage. Yet their looks are deceiving. Beneath the almost comical harlequin exterior lies an endurance predator, wired for relentless pursuit and cooperative slaughter. Their story begins not in isolation, but in the family. Wild dog packs are intricate social units, ruled not by dominance and submission alone, but by a surprisingly complex network of cooperation and care. There is a breeding pair at the top, a bonded alpha male and female, but they are less tyrants and more benevolent leaders. The entire pack, regardless of hierarchy, rallies around their pups, raising them as a collective. Older siblings babysit, aunts and uncles regurgitate meals for the young, and the whole unit operates like a village bound by blood and survival instinct. In a land where selfishness often reigns supreme, the wild dogs live by an opposite code: together or not at all. As the coolness of morning begins to thin and the sun sharpens its glare, the wild dog pack stirs. Sleep fades quickly for these predators because time is their most precious weapon. They are crepuscular hunters, preferring to strike in the early hours when the heat has not yet sapped their prey's strength. They move with electrifying unity, not a leader barking orders, but an instinctive ballet of shared intention. Without verbal signals, they fan out across the savannah, spreading wide to increase their coverage, each dog attuned to the other as if wired to the same thought. They do not creep with feline stealth. Rather, they rely on endurance and numbers to wear their prey down. The first sighting of a herd of impala or a cluster of gazelles sparks no dramatic explosion. There is no rushed ambush. Instead, the dogs quicken their pace, ears erect, tails flicking like metronomes. They are warming up the engine, stretching their muscles for the marathon hunt to come. And once they break into a run, they can hold their blistering pace for kilometers, pressing their quarry into panic, fracturing herds into fragments, scattering the weak from the strong. What follows is an astonishing display of tactical mastery. The dogs communicate constantly, chirping, twittering, and whining in a chorus of battlefield updates that keep the whole pack coordinated. They flank, feint, and funnel their prey, herding animals toward ambush points or into the waiting jaws of their companions. If a target tries to double back, another dog is there to cut it off. If it bolts to the side, flankers close in like living walls. It is not a fair chase. It is a siege on legs. Unlike the cheetah, whose sprint is a high-risk wager on explosive speed, the wild dogs play a game of attrition. They push their quarry to exhaustion, forcing their prey into a respiratory crisis long before the teeth touch flesh. And when the moment comes, it is swift, efficient, and shockingly democratic. There is no squabbling over the kill, no posturing or thieving. Once the animal falls, the pack descends in harmony, tearing it apart and devouring it in minutes. What was once a panicked impala is reduced to bone and red stain in a matter of heartbeats. But even perfection has its price, and in the Serengeti, nothing exists without rivals. Lions, ever the opportunists, often follow wild dog packs at a distance, waiting for the moment to charge in and steal their hard-earned meal. Hyenas, too, hover at the edges of their hunts, hoping to capitalize on the feast. And the dogs, for all their skill, are no match for these heavier, more powerful scavengers in direct combat. When larger predators arrive, the wild dogs must make a brutal calculation: fight and risk the lives of the pack, or flee and hunt again another day. Almost always they choose survival over pride. Perhaps it is this pragmatism that has allowed wild dogs to endure, despite the many threats they face. Outside the natural dangers of the savannah, their greatest enemy is one they cannot see coming: humanity. Habitat fragmentation, snares set by bushmeat hunters, and diseases like rabies and canine distemper, spread from domestic dogs, have devastated wild dog populations across Africa. Once ranging across nearly the entire continent, they are now among Africa's most endangered carnivores, their numbers reduced to fragile clusters fighting not just for food, but for existence. Yet the wild dogs of the Serengeti continue their dance across the plains with undiminished spirit. Against the backdrop of predators larger and more famous, they thrive in their defiant, democratic way. They hunt with precision, they live with purpose, and they survive with a tenacity that defies the odds. They are the embodiment of cooperation in a land ruled by conflict, a reminder that sometimes unity is the sharpest fang of all. As the sun sinks lower and the long shadows stretch across the blood-soaked grass, the wild dogs retreat to their den sites. Pups rush forward to greet the returning hunters, tails wagging furiously, ears flapping in excitement. The adults, mouths still stained with the red evidence of their morning's work, regurgitate food for the hungry mouths. It is a scene of tenderness at odds with the savagery of the hunt, a quiet moment in the life of a predator whose power lies not in brute strength, but in the strength of the pack. Tomorrow the hunt will begin again. The Serengeti will wake, and with it the wild dogs will rise to run once more. They will test the limits of endurance, thread their precision tactics through the chaos of the plains, and carve another chapter into the living story of this endless battlefield. Because in this war zone of tooth and claw, the wild dog survives not by being the fastest or the strongest, but by being the most united force the savannah has ever known. There is a moment, each year, when the Serengeti seems to hold its breath. The air thickens not from the clouds or the heat, but from something ancient and inevitable that stirs in the bones of the land. The horizon trembles with life. Hooves beat a thunderous pulse into the soil as millions of wildebeest, zebras, and antelopes surge forward like a living river, driven by instincts older than memory. They have crossed plains of searing dust and meadows of emerald green, chased rains as if following a vanishing mirage. But now their path leads them to an obstacle far more sinister than drought or distance. Ahead lies the Mara River, snaking through the Serengeti like a coiled serpent, its muddy waters hiding a menace carved from prehistory itself. Beneath the surface, a congregation of crocodiles lies in wait, silent, patient, and ravenous. What to the herds is merely a crossing is, to these ancient predators, a blood-stained highway. The Mara River does not shout its dangers. On the surface, it flows with deceptive calm, its waters carrying reflections of acacia trees and drifting clouds as if nothing lurks beneath. Yet hidden under this tranquil mask are the Nile crocodiles, masters of ambush and rulers of the current. Some stretch longer than a family sedan, their ridged backs camouflaged against the river's bottom, their eyes protruding just above the waterline, unblinking, unwavering, betraying nothing of the lethal power coiled beneath. They do not prowl in haste. Patience is their religion, and the migration is their holy season. For months, the crocodiles have waited. The dry season thinned their meals to scraps and scattered prey to safer, shallower waters. But the migration changes everything. It is as if the very river itself fattens overnight, not with water, but with life hurtling straight toward its jaws. The crocodiles, ancient survivors of Earth's turbulent epochs, know this ritual well. They have seen it for millions of years, long before human eyes ever watched in horrified fascination. And they will see it for millions more, if time permits. As the first wave of hooves approaches the banks, a palpable tension electrifies the air. The herds bunch tightly, a chaotic swarm of muscle and fear, jostling and surging toward the river's edge. Dust billows into the sky, masking the sun in a hazy glow. The wildebeest, those perennial wanderers, push forward with a kind of tragic optimism, as if they sense the danger but have no choice but to surrender to it. And they are correct. Behind them, the pressure of thousands more drives them inexorably to the brink. Before them, the water churns deceptively, its glassy surface betraying nothing of the scaled horrors lying in wait. One brave or foolish soul takes the plunge, launching into the water with a splash that triggers the inevitable cascade. Dozens follow, then hundreds, until the river becomes a boiling torrent of panicked bodies, each animal thrashing to stay afloat as the current tugs and pulls with greedy fingers. Hooves kick and churn, horns clash in the frenzy, and splashes rise in curtains that momentarily veil what happens next. From beneath, the crocodiles strike with terrifying precision. They do not chase, they explode. A ripple becomes a geyser of teeth and muscle as a crocodile lunges upward, jaws clamping down with a force that can crush bone like brittle twigs. Victims are seized by the muzzle, the flank, the legs, any vulnerable point that offers a hold. And once the grip is firm, the crocodile begins its infamous death roll, spinning its massive body with wild ferocity, tearing flesh from bone in a blur of blood and water. There is no escape for those caught in this merciless ballet. The river becomes a storm of violence, churned not by the flow of water, but by the chaos of predator and prey locked in their ancient struggle. Some animals drown beneath the crushing press of their panicked kin. Others, mortally wounded, drift downstream before succumbing to exhaustion or blood loss. The crocodiles, with cold efficiency, drag carcasses to submerged caches along the riverbed, wedging them beneath logs and stones like grim larders for future feasting. Yet remarkably, many survive. For all its horrors, the crossing is not a guaranteed massacre. Crocodiles, even in their prehistoric perfection, are limited by hunger and opportunity. The river claims hundreds, perhaps thousands, but the great herds number in the millions. Survival for most lies not in outswimming the crocodiles but in sheer volume, offering enough victims to feed the beasts while the majority surges through to safety. In this brutal arithmetic, the fate of an individual matters little. It is the survival of the multitude that ensures the continuation of the migration's timeless cycle. As the crossing tapers off, the aftermath reveals a scene of grim contrast. The riverbanks are strewn with the drowned and the dismembered, their lifeless forms feeding scavengers both above and below the water. Vultures descend in raucous clouds, stripping flesh from bone with surgical efficiency. Marabou storks, with their ghastly cloaks and dagger-like beaks, patrol the fringes like undertakers at a battlefield. Hyenas gather along the banks, cackling as they seize discarded limbs and scraps left behind by the river's cruel banquet. And the crocodiles? They retreat to the shallows, bellies swollen, jaws stained crimson, their primal hunger sated, for now. They bask along the muddy shores, their rough skins baking in the sun, motionless save for the occasional twitch of a tail or flick of a crusted eyelid. In these moments of rest, they appear almost like statues carved by the river itself, relics of a more savage era still thriving in the modern world. But the peace is fleeting. The migration moves in waves, and another herd waits just beyond the horizon, driven by the same relentless need for greener pastures. The crocodiles know this. They know that the feast is not yet over, that the Mara River will once again teem with desperate swimmers and the promise of another harvest. Patience is their oldest ally, and in this river, patience is always rewarded. What makes the crossing so astonishing is not merely its violence, but its role in the Serengeti's grand design. The deaths feed more than just the crocodiles. They nourish the ecosystem itself. The scraps left behind fertilize the riverbanks, feed scavengers, and return nutrients to the land. The drama of life and death at the Mara is not senseless carnage, but a brutal, vital act in the endless performance of nature's survival play. As the sun dips toward the horizon, casting the river in hues of molten gold and shadow, the crocodile highway quiets once more. The survivors limp onto dry land, dripping and trembling, their eyes wild but alive. Behind them, the river claims its final toll, the last victims sinking beneath the surface as if swallowed by the earth itself. In the Serengeti, life is movement, and movement demands risk. The crocodiles understand this as well as the herds they hunt. They are not villains of this story, but participants, keepers of the river's grim toll booth, ancient guardians of the passage between survival and oblivion. And as long as the rains fall and the herds march, as long as hunger gnaws at belly and bone, the Mara will continue to flow red during migration season. Because in this land, even rivers have teeth. As the Serengeti yawns beneath the golden swell of another day, its endless plains already trembling with life and death, there is a strange, almost comedic cast of characters waiting in the wings. They are not the thundering lions, nor the streaking cheetahs, nor the crocodilian warlords of the river. No, these creatures are the unsung custodians of the savannah. They are the opportunists, the aftermath architects, the connoisseurs of decay. They arrive after the dust has settled and the blood has cooled, but never mistake their tardiness for irrelevance. Without them, the battlefield would fester beneath the African sun. Meet the vultures and the jackals, nature's ultimate cleanup crew, scavengers of scandalous efficiency, operating with a flair for the dramatic and a hunger that knows no decorum. As the first carcass collapses beneath the Serengeti sun, the vultures have already marked its location. High above, where the winds cradle them like ancient mariners of the sky, vultures glide in solemn circles, their dark silhouettes pinwheeling against the blue expanse. They do not flap frantically like panicked pigeons. Instead, they coast with effortless grace, riding invisible thermals, scanning the earth with laser precision. Their eyes, honed over millennia, can spot a fallen animal from several kilometers away, picking out the slightest detail. A flicker of movement, a blood-darkened shadow, a lone predator dragging a kill. As soon as one descends, others follow, as if summoned by some invisible dinner bell. The sky, moments before an empty canvas, becomes a gathering storm of wings. They do not call to each other in chorus. They need no invitation. The mere act of descent triggers a cascading response, a visual telegram that death has been served. Before long, the sky is alive with a feathered frenzy, and the ground trembles with the chaotic shuffle of clawed feet. There is a peculiar beauty to their descent, a choreography of carnage played out beneath the merciless sun. The vultures do not waste time with formalities. They land, hiss, spread their wings in threat displays, and surge toward the feast with a hunger that is both frantic and methodical. Their bald heads, an evolutionary adaptation to keep gore from matting their feathers, plunge into the soft underbellies of the dead, tearing at tendons and organs with sickle-shaped beaks designed for disassembly. They feed not with the elegance of predators, but with the ferocity of survivalists, stripping a carcass to bone in a matter of minutes. But vultures are not monolithic. They are a guild of specialists. The lappet-faced vulture, burly and brutish, arrives like the sledgehammer of the cleanup crew. Its massive beak can split hide and shatter ribs, opening access to the softer morsels within. White-backed vultures, more numerous and agile, dive in to pick the exposed flesh clean. Ruppel's griffins, champions of altitude and endurance, join the melee, slotting themselves into the feeding frenzy with almost comical precision. Even the hooded vultures, daintier and more delicate, perform their surgical role, probing crevices and nibbling at scraps left behind by their larger cousins. This orchestrated demolition is no chaotic free-for-all. It is an ecological masterpiece of efficiency. Vultures are not just opportunists, they are vital custodians of the savannah. Their cast-iron stomachs, packed with corrosive acids, neutralize lethal pathogens that would otherwise linger in decaying meat. Anthrax, botulism, rabies, diseases that could devastate ecosystems, are safely contained within the gut of the vulture. In a land where death is as abundant as life, Their role as nature's sanitation service cannot be overstated. Without them, the Serengeti would reek not of sun-warmed grasses, but of rot and ruin. Yet vultures are not the only custodians of the carcass. Down on the ground, slinking through the grass with mischievous eyes and twitching noses, come the jackals, smaller than the fearsome hyena, but no less cunning. Jackals are the master thieves of the Serengeti, blending sharp intelligence with shameless opportunism. They do not soar above the plains, but they keep their ears pricked and their eyes sharp, watching the vultures with practiced patience. For where the vultures go, a feast is sure to follow. The jackal operates with the mindset of a streetwise pickpocket, always scanning for an opening, a moment when the giants are too distracted to notice the sly thief slipping through the chaos. They dart between the legs of squabbling vultures, nip scraps from beneath snarling beaks, and snatch morsels of meat like stealthy bandits at a festival. Their movements are quicksilver, their timing impeccable. They risk injury with every theft, but the rewards are too tempting to resist. Unlike the pack-hunting wild dogs or the proud lion prides, jackals often work in pairs or small family units, displaying a quiet, intimate cooperation. Mates call softly to each other, directing attention to overlooked scraps or warning of larger threats. Pups, when they are old enough, trail nervously behind, learning the family trade from their more experienced elders. Watching a pair of jackals navigate a vulture-dominated kill is to witness nature's version of a heist movie, fast, clever, and brimming with risky charm. Yet the life of a scavenger is not without peril. The Serengeti is a hierarchy of hunger, and jackals sit precariously above the rodents, but well below the lions and hyenas. A careless move can turn a meal into a mortal mistake. Lions, ever territorial over their spoils, will not hesitate to crush a jackal foolish enough to test their patience. Hyenas, blunt instruments of appetite, see jackals not as rivals but as potential snacks themselves. Even the vultures, if pressed, will lash out with sharp beaks and savage talons. But adversity breeds adaptability, and the jackals have become maestros of survival in this perilous theater. They know when to press their luck and when to retreat, when to challenge a juvenile vulture and when to sidestep a territorial hyena. They read the battlefield with the finesse of seasoned generals, exploiting every weakness and capitalizing on every distraction. As the sun arcs toward the zenith and the carrion is reduced to skeletal remains, the cleanup crew prepares to depart. The vultures, gorged and grotesquely swollen, flap lazily back into the thermals, their shadows sliding across the ground like passing storms. The jackals, bellies distended but eyes still hungry, slink away into the grasslands, ever watchful for the next opportunity. And the Serengeti, cleansed of death's debris, exhales in quiet relief. In this grand, brutal pageant of life, the vultures and jackals play roles no less vital than the lion or the crocodile. They are the final act, the unsung heroes who prevent the landscape from drowning in decay. They turn death into life, waste into nourishment, ensuring that the cycle continues unbroken. Without them, the Serengeti would choke on its own abundance. As dusk settles over the plains and the first stars prick the darkening sky, the stage is cleared for the next day's drama. The predators will rise, the prey will flee, and somewhere over the horizon, the cleanup crew will watch and wait. Because in the endless theater of the Serengeti, there is always another scene to tidy up. There are few spectacles on Earth as mighty as the Great Migration, and fewer still that can claim to be so violent, so chaotic, and yet so beautifully orchestrated. From afar, it resembles a natural masterpiece, a majestic procession of life unfurling across the vast Serengeti plains. But step closer, feel the ground tremble beneath your feet, taste the dust that clouds the air, and you will find yourself engulfed not in a peaceful march, but in a symphony of savagery. This is not simply a journey. It is nature's grand opera, composed in the language of hunger, desperation, and unstoppable momentum, performed by millions of hooves and shadowed by predators lurking in every verse. The migration begins with a whisper, a subtle shift in the wind, a scent carried over endless miles of sun-scorched earth. Rain. It is always the promise of rain that ignites this ancient pilgrimage. Deep within their bones, wildebeest feel the subtle pulse of the seasons before clouds ever gather. They are not guided by maps or memory, but by a primal urge stitched into their very DNA. Alongside them, zebras flick their tails and raise their striped heads, their senses tuned to the same invisible call. Gazelles and elands, sensing the imminent tidal wave of movement, gather in clusters, their bright eyes flickering with both excitement and fear. What starts as scattered groups soon swells into a living river of bodies, millions strong. Hooves drum against the earth in a rhythm as old as time, a heartbeat of the savannah that echoes from horizon to horizon. Dust clouds bloom like thunderheads behind them, casting a golden haze over the landscape. At its peak, the migration is so immense that it can be seen from space, a pulsing artery of life threading its way through the veins of East Africa. Yet beneath this majestic exterior lies a storm of turmoil. The Great Migration is not a gentle procession, but a brutal test of endurance. Each step forward is a wager against death. Starvation shadows the herds when rains delay or grasslands fail to recover. Thirst gnaws at their flanks during long, parched stretches between waterholes. Exhaustion hounds the very old and the very young, slowing them just enough for death to close in. But of all the threats the migrants face, none loom larger than the predators that follow them like dark crescendos in this savage symphony. Lions are never far behind, their amber eyes scanning the surging herds for signs of weakness. They wait at choke points along the migration route, patient as boulders, until the rhythm of hooves brings the orchestra to their doorstep. When the moment strikes, they launch into the fray, claws unsheathed, teeth bared, bodies colliding with their prey in bone-rattling force. Dust explodes around them, the savannah erupting into chaos as prey animals scatter like startled notes on a wind-blown score. Not to be outdone, the hyenas play their own sinister instruments in this cacophony of survival. They do not rely on ambush, but on endurance, trailing the herds like tireless shadows, waiting for fatigue to do its grim work. When a wildebeest falters or a zebra stumbles, they close in, their relentless laughter rising above the din like the mocking refrain of some dark choir. Packs coordinate with terrifying precision, circling, harassing, and eventually overwhelming their quarry. For them, the migration is not a journey, it is a feast that moves of its own accord. And then there is the Mara River, the most notorious conductor in this brutal symphony. When the herds reach its muddy banks, they do so not with celebration, but with grim inevitability. The crossing is a crucible, a narrow corridor where survival is reduced to sheer chaos. Wildebeest crowd the banks, driven by the pressure of thousands more pressing from behind. Panic spreads like wildfire as the first leap into the swirling waters, their eyes wide with fear, nostrils flaring at the scent of predators lurking below. Crocodiles, patient masters of ambush, explode from the depths like scales forged from nightmares. They clamp down on legs, flanks, and throats with crushing force, dragging their prey into the murky abyss. The river becomes a battlefield, churned not by the current alone, but by the frantic struggles of prey and predator locked in a deadly embrace. Some animals drown beneath the press of their own kind, while others claw their way to the far bank, bloodied but alive. For every survivor, another is claimed by the river's relentless hunger. Above this watery carnage, vultures spiral in lazy circles, their sharp eyes trained on the chaos below. They know the music of the migration well, and they wait for the crescendo to pass, for the bodies to rise to the surface or be abandoned on the banks. They are the final movement in this grim composition, sweeping in to cleanse the stage before the next act begins. Yet, despite its brutality, the migration is not merely a saga of death. It is also an explosion of life. Calves are born in astonishing numbers, their spindly legs wobbling as they take their first perilous steps. Mothers risk everything to shield their young, battling predators with a courage that defies their usual flight instincts. Grasslands, grazed to stubble by the passing herds, regenerate with renewed vigor, fertilized by the very carcasses of those who fell along the way. Even scavengers play a role in this renewal, dispersing nutrients and ensuring that nothing is wasted. The migration sustains more than just the predators and the prey. It is the lifeblood of the entire Serengeti ecosystem, feeding rivers with hoof-churned sediment, fertilizing plains with droppings and decay, and dispersing seeds that will sprout into next season's green havens. The Serengeti itself breathes in rhythm with the herds, expanding and contracting as they move across its sun-drenched face. As the season shifts and the rains arrive once more, the herds press onward, driven by the unrelenting call of survival. The predators follow, leaner and hungrier. The scavengers drift behind like echoes fading into silence, and the cycle begins anew. The Great Migration never truly ends, it merely loops, like an eternal symphony played across time, its notes written in dust, blood, and the cries of the wild. In this grand, sprawling masterpiece, every creature plays a part. The wildebeest may be the beating heart, but the lions are the booming drums, the hyenas the snarling brass, the crocodiles the thunderous percussion, and the vultures the lingering notes that fade into twilight. Together, they compose a melody of survival that resonates far beyond the plains of Africa. A reminder that even in nature's most savage performances, there is beauty in the chaos, rhythm in the violence, and harmony in the endless struggle to endure. And so, as the sun sinks behind the acacia trees and the Serengeti cools beneath a blanket of dusk, the great herds continue their march beneath the watchful eyes of the predators and scavengers alike. The symphony plays on, relentless and magnificent, echoing across the savannah, a song of life and death that will never grow old. As the dawn blushes across the vast canvas of the Serengeti, splashing gold across the thorny acacias and waking the restless chorus of wildebeest, zebras, and every hungry, lurking predator, it feels as though you're watching a world entirely self-sufficient, ancient, and untouchable. The sun rises as it always has, casting long shadows of giraffes as they drift across the plains like slow-moving ships. Lions stretch beneath their shaded cathedrals of branches, while the high thermals lift vultures lazily skyward, awaiting their inevitable summons. It feels like a living relic of prehistory, a place where nature still writes the rules in blood and bone, as if mankind has barely scratched its surface. But look closer, beneath the romantic veil of wilderness, and you'll find a quieter battle humming beneath the louder rhythms of tooth and claw. It is the battle of man versus wild, a struggle not waged with rifles and traps, but with patrol boots, worn notebooks, radio crackles, and weathered hands fighting to save what remains of this primal kingdom. The Serengeti, for all its grandeur, has never truly stood apart from human hands. For thousands of years, local tribes like the Maasai have coexisted with these wild plains, their herds threading through predator territory with a mixture of bravery and wisdom passed down through generations. They understood the cadence of life here, not as conquerors, but as participants in the same fragile dance of survival. Yet, as human populations swelled and the invisible lines of modern civilization expanded, the ancient harmony began to fray. Roads carved through migration routes like scars across skin. Expanding farms gnawed at the edges of wild corridors, and the thunder of trucks replaced the rumble of hooves in some places. With every fence post hammered into the soil, the Serengeti grew a little smaller. Its predators pushed a little closer to the margins. It is here, in these strained margins, that conservationists have drawn their battle lines. They are not heroes in shining armor, nor mythical guardians of the wild, but they are warriors in their own right, armed with GPS collars, tranquilizer darts, and an unyielding determination to wrestle this landscape away from the brink of collapse. Their war is not against nature, but for it, against poachers, habitat loss, and the creeping shadow of extinction. Unlike the lion's savage, immediate contest for territory, the conservationists' fight is slow, grinding, and relentless, fought not in a single victorious charge, but in daily skirmishes, small wins that add up to survival for entire species. Patrol teams rise with the first light, long before the tourists with their clicking cameras appear. They move out in battered Land Cruisers, their tires carving dusty trails through golden grass. Radios crackle with reports, lion sightings near grazing cattle, suspicious tracks by the riverbank, a snare discovered in the shadow of a lonely acacia. Each call is a spark of urgency. Every footprint in the dust might tell a story of life or death, and these rangers have become fluent in the silent language of the bush. Poaching, though quieter than the roaring predator battles of the plains, is no less lethal. An elephant's ivory, a rhino's horn, these have become grotesque currency in a global black market driven by ignorance and greed. It is a tragedy played out far from the eyes of the Serengeti's sun-baked stage, yet its impact echoes loudly across these lands. An elephant falls not to age or predator, but to a bullet from the shadows. A rhino's legacy is severed at the base of its horn, leaving behind not just a carcass, but an aching void in the ecosystem. But the response to this threat is not despair, it is defiance. Conservationists have embraced technology as their ally in this ancient battle. Drones buzz overhead like vigilant dragonflies, scanning the savannah for illegal activity. GPS collars track the wandering monarchs of the plains, allowing rangers to follow prides of lions and solitary rhinos, learning their habits, their territories, and, most importantly, protecting them from those who would do them harm. Hidden camera traps capture the secret lives of nocturnal creatures, revealing patterns and vulnerabilities invisible to the human eye. Anti-poaching units, hardened by experience, tread softly through thorny thickets, their eyes sharp for the telltale glint of wire snares or discarded cartridge cases. They work long hours under punishing heat, their work driven not by the promise of fame, but by the quiet, stubborn belief that these wild creatures deserve more than to vanish into memory. Every snare they disarm, every poacher they deter, is a silent victory in a war too often fought in the shadows. Yet conservation in the Serengeti is not merely about defense, it is about balance. Livestock herders, struggling to sustain their families, often see lions not as majestic symbols of Africa's wilderness, but as killers of their cattle. For these communities, the loss of even a single cow can mean financial disaster. Conservationists must therefore become diplomats as much as defenders, weaving delicate truces between humans and predators. Programs that compensate farmers for livestock lost to lions, that build predator-proof enclosures, or that train local communities in wildlife monitoring, are vital threads stitching together the torn fabric of coexistence. Education is another crucial weapon in this quieter war. Schools across the Serengeti now teach children not only about mathematics and history, but about the living heritage of their land. Future farmers, rangers, and community leaders are learning to see lions, elephants, and rhinos not as enemies of progress, but as priceless treasures, keys to sustainable tourism and global respect. When a child grows up understanding that the roar of a lion is not merely a threat, but a privilege to be protected, the future of the Serengeti brightens just a little. And there is, despite all odds, a fragile hope rising over these plains. Lion numbers, once plummeting toward despair, are holding steady in protected areas. Rhinos, though still under siege, find sanctuary in well-guarded zones, their hornless shadows a defiant reminder that survival sometimes demands painful compromises. Elephant herds, with their tight family bonds and mournful wisdom, still march across the savannah, trumpeting life into the winds of uncertainty. As dusk descends, casting the Serengeti in molten amber, the patrols return to camp, their faces streaked with sweat and dust, their eyes scanning the horizon, even in rest. The plains quiet, but the war never truly ends. In the distance, a lioness calls softly to her cubs, a sound both fierce and fragile. Nearby, a rhino stirs in the tall grass, unaware of the watchful guardians keeping him safe beneath the blanket of night. This is the front line of conservation, a place where courage is measured not in dramatic gestures, but in persistence. It is a war waged step by dusty step, by choices made in the face of exhaustion and fear, by a stubborn refusal to let Africa's great wildernesses fade into history. Here, in the heat and heartbeat of the Serengeti, mankind's better nature battles its darker impulses. And for now, at least, the wild still has its champions. The Serengeti does not yet belong to memory. Its lions still roar, its herds still thunder across the plains, and its rivers still flow red during the migration. Thanks to the silent, relentless work of those who have chosen to stand between extinction and survival, this epic of life continues. And as long as there are those willing to fight for the wild, the symphony of the Serengeti will not fade. It will play on, fierce and free, beneath the eternal African sun.